code. So let's say something on weighted marginal cost of capital. That is Wmcc. So weighted marginal cost of capital. So you can say this. It is the cost of additional new funds. It's the cost of additional new funds for undertaking the firm's new projects. The cost of additional new funds for undertaking the firm's new projects. So let's see differences between Wscc and Wmcc. Differences between work and Wmcc. They can carry the cross. On one side we have Wscc, on the other side we have Wmcc. We have Wscc and we have Wmcc. So on the side of WSCC, just getting differences in mbili peke yake. So WSC number one, it is the cost of existing funds. The cost of existing funds invested in the farm, invested in existing projects. The cost of existing funds invested in existing projects, i.e. historical cost. It's the cost of existing funds invested in existing projects, that is historical cost. So WSCC is the cost of what we have, historical. That's why when you look at the questions that we are doing on WSCC, they're always talking about the firm's current, it's all about historical, what is currently there in the company. Then on the other side of Wmcc, it's the cost of new funds. It's the cost of new funds for investing in the firm's new projects. It's the cost of new funds for investing in the firm's new projects. So when you look at WSC like this question, you look at the information about the question. The following is an extract of statement of financial position for the year ended. It's talking about historical. The share capital, blah, blah, blah. The ordinary shares have a nominal value of that, ex-dividend of that, the dividends for the year. So you see, the 5% have a nominal value, the long-term, blah, blah. So it's all about historical. They have the loan notes have a nominal value. It's telling us about what is there in the company. So the existing funds, that is WSCC. So WMCC, the cost of the new funds for undertaking the firm's new projects, can put into brackets, i.e. futuristic costs. Futuristic cost. Difference number two, on the side of WSCC, we say market value weights. Market value weights are used. Market value weights are used. I believe we remember how to calculate the market value weights. The ones we calculated from the capital structure of the company. Number of ordinary shares times the market price per share times the ex-div market price per share. Number of preference shares times the ex-div market price per share. The number of debentures times the X interest price to get the market value. On the other side, you say marginal weights are used. Marginal weights are used, i.e., weights as directly determined. Weights as directly determined from the firm's optimal capital structure. Weights as directly determined from the firm's optimal capital structure. So weights as directly determined from the firm's optimal capital structure. Those are the two differences between MCC and SCC. WSCC, cost of what we have. WMCC, cost of what we need. So skip one line, then you say, when raising the new funds, the firm utilizes each of the available capital components as per their weights stroke proportions in the optimal capital structure. So if I want to raise a total of 10 million, I look at my capital structure. For WMCC, the capital structure must be optimal. If I want to raise 10 million, I look at my optimal capital structure. Out of the 10 million, I must raise part of it from equity, part of it from preference shares, part of it from debt, depending on the composition of my capital structure. So if in my capital structure, the weight of equity is 60%, then even the new funds, 60% must be represented by equity. If debt is maybe 20%, so the 20% shall be maintained even when raising the new funds. We're going to see it in a question, what I mean by that. Next, you say at times, there may be more than one source. From a given capital component. There may be more than one source from a given capital component. E.g., equity may comprise ordinary share capital and retained earnings. Equity may comprise ordinary share capital and retained earnings. So in this component called equity, we may have two sources. We have one source which is retained earnings, and we have ordinary shares. Full stop, continue by saying, in such a case, the firm fully utilizes amount available from a cheaper source. The firm fully utilizes amount available from a cheaper source i.e. retained earnings before raising any new funds from a more expensive source. The firm fully utilizes amount available from a cheaper source, i.e. retained earnings, before raising any new funds from a more expensive source. Hence, a breakpoint. Hence a breakpoint. Hence a breakpoint. Then you can say this. Breakpoint refers to the total amount to raise while utilizing amount available from a cheaper source in a given capital component. So the total amount to raise while utilizing amount available from a cheaper source in a given capital component. What is the total that I'll be raising when I'm using retained earnings as my equity before I use the ordinary shares? Again, as I said, we are going to see it in the question. Just give the formula that breakpoint equals amount available divide by weight. Amount available divided by weight. The amount available divided by weight. That gives us the breakpoint. Amount available divided by the weight. Good. So let's get a question and we see what we are talking about. A question on WMCC. So that is WACC. So you have several questions that you can attempt as far as WACC is concerned. So there's WMCC here, question 3A of December 2021. So question 3 of December 2021, we can look at that one. So even as we analyze it, I want us to compare it with the WSCC so that we understand the difference. We are told that Mavazi Limited is a firm that operates in the textile industry. Over the last 5 years, the firm has experienced stiff competition that has significantly reduced its turnover. In order to remain profitable, the firm's management is considering diversifying its operations. This activity will require additional financing of 50 million. Look at the English in the question. Additional financing of 50 million, meaning when I'm raising the additional 50 million, the cost of getting the additional 50 million is WMCC, not WSCC. WSCC is the cost of what we have. The firm's existing capital structure is given as follows. We have ordinary share capital and reserves. The two will form equity. 11% debentures per value is 100 and 13% preference shares per value is 15. The firm's existing capital structure is considered to be optimal. Very important. Under WMCC, the capital structure must be optimal. And optimal means it is fully utilized. Haina spare capacity. And that's why I need 50 million, I have to go. I have to raise it as new funds because what is currently there in the company is fully committed to existing projects. The capital structure is at its optimal, is at its maximum. We don't have any spare capacity. The firm expects to raise 5 million from internal sources in order to finance this diversification activity. By all means, we all know that internal sources need retained earnings, the internal equity. So we have amount expected from the retained earnings, which is 5 million. 5 million. However, new ordinary shares will be issued at 32 shillings per share and incur a flotation cost of 2 shillings per share. Wakati tulikuwa tunafanya WSCC, hakuna mahali tulikuwa na flotation cost because we were not floating anything. Flotation cost is the issue cost. We are now at WSCC, we were not issuing any funds. We are looking for the cost of what was issued kitambo, so it didn't have any issue cost. But in WMCC, we shall now incur the flotation or issue costs because we are raising the new funds. So hapa tuko na flotation costs. And I think we all remember how to calculate the KE. The KE for the retained earnings do not attract the flotation cost. KE of ordinary shares, they attract a flotation cost. That's the difference. The most recent dividend paid by the company was 2.5 per share, which is expected to grow at a constant rate of 5% per annum in perpetuity. So the most recent dividend, you and me remember that to be DO. DO. Historical, the dividend that has just been paid, the most recent dividend. For it to be D1, it must be expected. Dividends payable in a year's time, expected, futuristic. New 12% redeemable debentures will be issued at 110. You see that? It will be issued. So the cost of what we want. Ukiangalia kwa capital structure, we have 11% debentures. Na hapa note number 4, wamesema they'll issue 12% debentures. What does that mean? 11% debentures haitatu affect. We are raising the new funds using another type of debenture, which is 12% debenture. A flotation cost of 15 per unit will be incurred. The par value of each unit is 100. Debentures will have a maturity period of 10 years. So this redeemable. New 14% irredeemable preference shares. So you see that the preference shares are also irredeemable. 14%, kwa capital structure ni 13%. So we are raising the new funds by issuing 14% preference shares. Will be issued at 90. The par value is 100. Tax is 30%. Good. Number 1, they want us to get the cost of ordinary share capital. So KE. of ordinary shares. Do you remember how to get it? DO or D1? DO into 1 plus G. We divide by what? PO minus the flotation cost. Uh-huh. And everything we add what? We add G. So plus G. To copy plus. So you have it there, then plus G. I think that's fine. So do we have our DO? The most recent dividend paid by the company is how much? 2.5 into the growth rate. The growth rate tuliambiwa at a constant growth rate of 5% per annum in perpetuity. So can I say 1.05? 1 plus G. Then we divide by PO. Our market price per share. The ordinary shares will be issued at 32 flotation cost of 2. So 32 minus the flotation cost of 2. Then we shall add our G. So plus 0.05 plus 0.05. What do we have there? Somebody? Somebody using the calculator? So plus 0.05.
0.1375.
0.1375. So make it a percentage by multiplying by 100. So 13.75. So that is the KE of ordinary shares. So they want us to get the KE of retained earnings. The cost of retained earnings. So KE of retained earnings. So for the KE of retained earnings, the formula is the same as ordinary shares. The difference between ordinary shares and the retained earnings is that retained earnings don't have a flotation cost. Kama kungekuwa na discount, ingetu affect, lakini flotation cost does not affect us. So the formula is still the same. So our workings are the same, lakini sasa haina the flotation cost. That's the difference. So tufinya kwa calc. So this divide by 32. Is it 12.96? That is correct.
I'm getting a different figure.
You're getting what?
13.2.
13.2. Somebody confirm.
Yes, I'm also getting 13.20%.
Yeah, true. 13.20. Umeona penye nilikuwa nimenyoroshwa. So 13.20%, that's fine. So that gives us the cost of retained earnings. Then can we have the after-tax cost of the debentures? KD equals to redeemable or irredeemable? Well, some it has a maturity period of 10 years. So it's 10 plus 1 over n into market value minus what? The book value or the face value. Divide by a half into market value plus book value. And everything we adjust for tax. So into 1 minus t. 1 minus t. So that is our KD, the formula. So how much is our interest? 12%. The par value alituambia ni 100. So 12% of 100. 12% of 100 plus 1 divided by the maturity period yake ilikuwa 10 years, not number 4. So 1 divided by 10 into, it has a market value of how much? The debentures will be issued at 110, lakini ziko na flotation cost of 15. So 110 minus 15. Remember what we said? In case of a discount or flotation cost, it reduces the market value. In case of a discount or flotation cost, it reduces the market value. So the market value is 110, but it has a flotation cost of 15. The par value is 100. So all that we divide by a half into, what is 110 minus 15? Is it 95? 95 minus 100, that is 110 minus 15. So instead of selling at 110, iko na flotation cost ya 15. Flotation cost reduces the market value. So you have that. Then 1 minus 0.3.
Just a question, is it supposed to be 95 plus, it's supposed to be 95 plus 100?
Sorry,
Not minus.
the denominator, yes, thank you for that. Plus 100. So this is 12 plus 1 over 10, saying times into brackets 95 minus 100, and everything I divide by 1 over 2 times 195. And everything I multiply by 0.7. So kufinya kwa calc unapata ngapi? Okay, so this is
8.25%.
that's percent.
I confirm.
8.25%. Thank you. So that is the KD of the debentures. Then they want us to get the cost of new 14% preference shares. So KP equals to preference dividends divided by what? Preference dividends divided by the market value. Does it have any flotation cost? It doesn't have, but kama ingekuwa just like the debentures or ordinary shares, kama ingekuwa flotation cost ama discount tungeless. So our dividends, 14% irredeemable preference shares will be issued at 90. The par value is 100. So that is 14% of 100, and we divide by 90. Um, 14% of 100 divided by 90. Because we make it a percentage, that is 14 divided by 90. 15.56%. 15.56%. There I think I'm correct. So that gives us the first 10 marks. 4 plus 4 plus to the first 10 marks. Debenture ilikuwa na 4 marks. Because of the redeemable na kulikuwa na kakacha hapo kwa hiyo flotation cost. Hata kama ingekuwa na discount pia tungeless. The discount of flotation cost reduces the market value. Now they want us to get the weighted marginal cost of capital. The weighted marginal cost of capital. Now, there is a challenge in this question in the sense that we know that WSCC or Wmcc is the weight of equity times cost of equity plus weight of debt times cost of debt plus weight of preference shares times cost of preference shares. In answering our part 5, let's first of all get the optimal capital structure. The optimal capital structure. In our optimal capital structure, we have the source, we have the amount, and we have the weight. The source, the amount, and the weight. Now source ya kwanza tuko nayo equity. Now the optimal capital structure unaichukua vile iko. Now we're saying that we have the source, amount, and weight. In the optimal capital structure, tulisema we use the marginal weights under Wmcc, and the marginal weights are what? The weights directly determined from the optimal capital structure. There's another difference between SCC and MCC. Kwa WSCC, hapa tungeanza kutafuta the number of shares, 60,000 divided by 20 times the market price per share of 32, ama 30. Debentures, 20,000 divided by 100 give us the number of debentures times the price per debenture. Under the optimal capital structure, WMCC, unazichukua vile ziko. Like now, equity, our equity will be the value of ordinary shares, which is 60,000, plus the value of retained earnings, which is 10,000, as it is from the in the optimal capital structure. So our value of equity is 70,000. Vile iko. Our value of debt is 20,000. And our
Just
value
a minute, your 20K. Just a minute, the 10K. Have you taken the
reserves.
for the equity?
Yeah, equity is
you
ordinary
just
shares and
added
reserves.
Okay.
Yeah. Reserves zinakuanga part of equity. Reserves can either be capital reserves or revenue reserves. Capital reserves being share premium, revenue reserves being the retained earnings. So reserves forms part of equity. Lakini tungekuwa kwa WSCC, equity ingekuwa represented by ordinary shares alone. Reserves tungezi ignore. Because tungetafuta the market value. Market value of equity is market value of ordinary shares. But the value of equity in the optimal capital structure is all the equity, ordinary shares and reserves. Reserves can be retained earnings or share premium. They all form equity. I hope that is clear. So preference shares ni 10,000 as it is in the optimal capital structure. As it is in the optimal capital structure. So the total of that gives us that. So do we have the weight of equity, the weight of debt, and the weight of preference shares? 70 divided by 100, 0.7. 20,000 divided by 100,000, 0.2. And 10,000 divided by 100,000. Total weight I can see is 1. So we're okay with that. I hope that they have not gone so fast. Now, when I'm raising these new funds, I know that equity has only one weight. But when you look at the component costs, I have K mbili ya retained earnings na ordinary shares. Looking at the two, retained earnings are cheaper than ordinary shares. And the source that is cheaper, you'll at least be given the maximum that you can raise from there. That's where note number 2 comes in. Out of my equity, I have retained earnings. The internal sources, we can raise 5 million from internal sources, that is retained earnings. So therefore, I come here and ask myself, can I get the breakpoint? The breakpoint. Which equals to amount available we divide it by weight. Amount available divided by weight. So the breakpoint will always arise where I have more than one source in a given component. Kwa hizi components zetu zote, equity as a source has two components, a component of retained earnings and ordinary shares. So I have two sources. I have two components in a source called equity. I have two components in a source called equity. And for that reason, I must first of all utilize amount available from a cheaper source. In our case, it is retained earnings, before raising any amount from a more expensive source. So before I get anything from ordinary shares, I must use the available retained earnings. How much do I have from the retained earnings? I can raise 5 million from the retained earnings. So in my breakpoint, if I want the breakpoint for the retained earnings, the breakpoint for the retained earnings, amount available from the retained earnings, you can see note number 2 is 5 million. And what is the weight of equity in our optimal capital structure? 0.7. So therefore, tuko na 5 million divided by 0.7. So that gives us that breakpoint. Inamaanisha nini? Inamaanisha kuwa when I'm using retained earnings as my equity, I'll be raising up to a total of 7142, 875, 857. Aka ka concept kwa kanasumbua watu, so I'm trying to go slowly so that we can be able to understand it. In the definition of breakpoint tulisema is the total amount to raise while using amount available from a cheaper source in a given component. Our component called equity has two sources, retained earnings and ordinary shares. Now, ni kama kujiuliza, anytime na raise funds, 70% will come from equity, 20% will come from debt, 10% will come from preference shares. Now, that 70%, the 70% that should come from equity, nataka itoke kwa retained earnings. Na retained earnings niko nazo ni 5 million. Anytime I'm raising funds, 70% will come from equity. This equity of ours has two sources. It has the source number 1, retained earnings, source number 2, ordinary shares. So I want, first of all, that 70% that should be equity to come from the retained earnings available, which are 5 million. So if 70% will come from the retained earnings, not ordinary shares, first of all, if 70% will come from retained earnings, which is 5 million, how much will be the 100%? How much will be the 100%? So if 70% equals to 5 million, what will be 100%? Nikifanya hesabu najua italeta 100 divided by 70 times 5 million. And I believe hiyo ndio hesabu tumefanya pale. You see what we get? So 100 over 70 times 5 million. So if 70% will come from the retained earnings, which are 5 million, how much will be the 100%? Great. Aye. So therefore, I'll put here my WMCC. The formula na WC is the same, equals to weight of equity times cost of equity plus weight of debt times cost of debt plus weight of preference shares times cost of preference shares. But I have to raise it in two ways. So I'll start with the WSMCC of raising up to Kenya shillings 71,42,857.14. So WMCC of raising up to that much. And when I'm raising up to 7.1 million, equity is coming from the retained earnings. Breakpoint inanisaidia tu kujibu swali moja. At what time do I stop using retained earnings as my equity so that now I shift to ordinary shares? I'll stop using my retained earnings as equity when I reach this limit. So for this reason, my weight of equity I can see 0.7. But now the KE, I'll be using the retained earnings. So my KE will be the KE of retained earnings, which is 13.2. So KE 13.2 plus the weight of debt or the weight of preference shares, whichever, the weight of debt is 0.2 times KD sina options mingi, ni moja tu. KD ni moja na ni 8.25. So times 8.25 plus the weight of preference shares is 0.1 times the cost of preference shares pia ni moja tu, 15.56. That is a percent. Hiyo hesabu nishakufanyia. Let me just conclude so that I can now give chance for any question. Then I'll have the second part of WMCC. WMCC of raising above ama over Kenya shilling 71.42. Now, if I go beyond that amount, if I go beyond the breakpoint, anytime I exceed 71.42,857, now I no longer have the retained earnings. I'll be left with only the option I'll be left with as far as equity is concerned. Now I'll be using the ordinary shares. So what am I talking about? In this case now, my WSCC, I have to move on. The weight of equity is 0.7. But now my KE has to change. I no longer have the retained earnings. Now I use the ordinary shares whose cost is 13.75. So 13.75. That is the only difference that is there. Breakpoint. When do I stop using the retained earnings so that I start using the ordinary shares? I stop using the retained earnings after I exceed my breakpoint. After I exceed my breakpoint. So the weight of debt is 0.2, but now I didn't have any other option. Debt ilikuwa tu moja peke yake, and the cost of debt is 8.25. Plus weight of preference shares is 0.1. Preference shares pia ni moja tu, whose cost is 15.56. So there we go. Any swali? So WMCC zitakuwa mbili. Zitakuwa mbili. Any question for Afula?
Good. Wow.
Aha. Hapo tumeamua kufungua roho bila swali.
So what's the answer?
The two are the answers. Let me try to explain it again. The total amount that the company wanted to raise was how much? 50 million. In raising the 50 million, the 50 million will be raised in two bits, in two portions. First of all, I'm using retained earnings as my equity because fortunately, equity, source called equity, has two components: retained earnings and ordinary shares. Retained earnings and ordinary shares. Now, I cannot use ordinary shares if I still have retained earnings available. As long as I can get some amount from the retained earnings, I'll be using the retained earnings, not the ordinary shares. And that's why we've been told the limit that we can get from the retained earnings is 5 million. So this 5 million helps us to get the breakpoint. The 5 million helps us to get the breakpoint. And what is the breakpoint? The total amount that I'll be raising while utilizing amount available from a cheaper source in a given capital component. This cheaper source in a capital component called equity is the retained earnings. So I first of all need to use the retained earnings before I can get anything from the ordinary shares. And that's why 70% will be the retained earnings. What will be 100%? And remember, 100% is made up of three components. Out of this 100%, I have equity, I have debt, and I have preference shares. Equity is 70%. So this 70%, I want it first of all to be the retained earnings, ambazo ni 5 million. What will be 100%? 71, 42. And this is what it means. Let me try this magic here. I don't know if I should call it magic ama niitaje. Let me do this. Now, this 7142 must come from three sources. Must come from equity, must come from debt, and must come from preference shares. Remember, tulisema kuwa the firm will raise the new funds from each of the capital component as per their proportion in the optimal capital structure. Even if I want to raise 10 shillings, the 10 shillings must come from all the three sources. From our capital structure, equity ni 70%. 0.7 is our equity. Debt imekuwa 20%, 0.2. Na preference shares ni 0.1. Now, this is any amount I'm raising. Equity must be 70%, debt must be 20%, preference shares must be 10%. Now, in getting a breakpoint before nifike hapa, I was to ask myself, this equity which is 70%, I need to utilize the 5 million that is available. Na hii 5 million ni ile ya retain earnings. Ni ile ya retain earnings. So the question is, if equity should give me the 5 million, how much should be the total that I'm raising? So 70% is 5 million. What is 100%? Na kwa kufanya 100% ndio tukapata 100% 7142. So this 7142, by the way, is not coming from equity alone. It's coming from equity, debt, and preference shares. So when I'm raising up to, hii ya kwanza hii, when I'm raising up to 7142, 70% of it will come from equity and, to be specific, retained earnings. 20% of these, if I do 20% of these, so this amount will come from from debt. And if I do 1%, 10% of this, niki-add hizi zote zinafaa zinipe this figure, the total amount that I'm raising. The total amount that I'm raising. You see? It's giving me the total, the breakpoint now. 7142,875. So inamaanisha kuwa anytime I'm raising funds, I must first of all utilize the amount available from a cheaper source. So my Wmcc, nita raise the 50 million that I wanted to raise, I'll raise in 2 bits. I start by raising up to ile breakpoint ya retain earnings. So out of 50 million, I'll raise the 7.14 million. Then I go and raise now the balance. The above 71.4 million, hapa naweza sema up to 50 million. Because I wanted to raise a total of 50 million. So I'll raise up to 7.14 million at a cost of 12.446. Then I'll raise above 7.14 million up to 50 million at a cost of 12.83. As you continue, cost inaendelea kuongezeka. It needs some practice, I know. Now, this is what I think we should do. I want to leave you with this question. Upitie polepole peke yako, so that on Friday, God willing, we can do. Let me try getting one more question that we'll do. Kama unajiamini, but you can do the component costs. Najua shida kazi kibarua inaanzia hapa kwa breakpoint, but huku juu the component cost I believe we can all do. So let me get a question that we can look at on Friday. At least you do the component costs. If you believe in yourself so much, you can also do can also pick it up na umalize. So question 5B of September 2021. September 2021, question 5 boy. So create some time, go through the question that you've just done. We understand vizuri. Then after you've gone through that one, kindly try September 2021, question 5 boy. Don't be afraid of failing. Make mistakes as much as you can. And if you make mistakes on this question, when we meet in our class on Friday, you'll understand it very fast. And if you can understand it very fast, good for us. We finish this topic, we go to the next one. Any question for me?